Hi everyone, I'm John Renney and welcome to the Boneyard. Are there any fans of found footage movies and historical sci-fi horror epics out there in the Boneyard? I figured there might be.
I did, man! You did, John! You get me home! Stop!
Released in 2011, Apollo 18, directed by Gonzalo Lopez Gallego, making his American movie debut, stood out to me amidst the many found footage horror releases at the time.
Get that damn thing out of my face!
Is a distinctly atmospheric and uniquely chilling entry into the found footage horror subgenre.
You can't help me, but you can save yourself.
Looking at Apollo 18, I think it clearly owes a great debt, as do most found footage movies, to the fantastic and controversial radio play War of the Worlds, directed by and starring the legendary Orson Welles. This captivating play was produced by Welles's Mercury Theatre some 40 years after H.G. Wells' story of an apocalyptic alien invasion was released in 1898. And Wells' radio play is arguably the birth of the mockumentary and found footage movie horror genre. When War of the Worlds was originally broadcast, it caused widespread panic amongst its listeners, as it was presented as a live radio play program. If listeners tuned in after the play began, it sounded as if it was happening for real. And back in 1948, this must have scared the living daylights out of its listeners. Panicked audiences began to call into the station in mass hysteria, and after it was all over, Orson Welles himself had to publicly apologize for causing the panic. And although Welles' apology was genuine, he went on later to say that his apology was some of the best acting that he had ever done. In the footage of the apology, you can see that Welles was a little shaken by the reaction of audiences, but I think he also knew that he had just made an impact on the world. Orson Welles truly was one of a kind.
We are deeply shocked and deeply regretful about the results of last night's broadcast. It came rather as a great surprise to us that a story about a mythical invasion by monsters from the planet Mars should have had so profound an effect upon radio listeners.
I mention this historic radio broadcast as it is still a great listen for fans of the genre today, and it deserves its place as one of the godfathers of the found footage and mockumentary genre. Of course, there are other literary forerunners, such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, amongst many others, especially the first-person narratives of Howard Phillips Lovecraft, which are written as factual accounts of real-life horrors. And without doubt, I think these writers helped to shape the found footage genre in film. This is an area of great interest to me, and I think worthy of a more advanced discussion in another full video on found footage films, so watch this space. Getting back to the found footage movie Apollo 18, as the found footage movie trend gained momentum in the early 2000s, with independent filmmakers following the massive success of the Blair Witch Project in 1999, which was then followed a few years later with the studio pickup and release of Oren Peli's micro-budget Paranormal Activity in 2007, the market was saturated with found footage movies. And for a lot of filmgoers, it quickly got boring, repetitive, as well as vomit-inducing, as untrained camera operators ran through woodlands at night, creating little to no terror with these no-budget efforts. But I was not one of those who got bored with the genre, and I eagerly watched the good, the bad, and the ugly of the found footage offerings that came out either straight to DVD or got limited cinema releases. I was quite taken with Apollo 18 on its release, as it seemed to have carved out its own niche by combining science fiction, history, and horror, and all in a claustrophobic, space-bound thriller.
The flag's gone.
This isn't right.
It may not have garnered as much universal acclaim as The Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity, but Lopez Gallego's commitment to creating an eerie sense of isolation in the vast unknown felt like something fresh being injected into the found footage genre in the mid-2000s.
Originator Ben.
The comm is still down with Liberty. We have no communication with the crew, but we are receiving data from the LEM. We're trying to...
This is not to say that it was wholly original. In the history of cinema, many storytellers had already mixed sci-fi and horror very successfully, with works such as Ridley Scott's Alien in 1978 and John Carpenter's The Thing in 1982, which, although not a success on its initial release, is now considered a classic by modern audiences. These films and their predecessors, such as It, The Terror from Beyond Space, released in '58, and the original The Thing from Another World, had proven already that there was an audience for horror and science fiction at the movies. And by the time Apollo 18 had came around, we had already had Hellraiser in space, and Friday the 13th in space with Jason X in 2001. The fact that Lopez Gallego was able to create such a unique vision, coming after so many other space-bound horror flicks, I think is something that should be applauded. And I have to say, I found it disappointing at the time that critics were so dismissive of Apollo 18 and lumped it in with the other, lesser found footage offerings of the day.
Guys, we need to get you out of there ASAP. Do you copy?
What I really do like about the film is that the concept of Apollo 18 is simple yet very well executed from a filmmaking and especially an editing perspective. The narrative of the film asks what if NASA's last crewed mission to the moon, which was believed to be cancelled, actually happened and something terrifying was found up there. Using found footage from that secret mission that was uploaded to a now disabled website named lunartruth.com by an anonymous user, the film invites the audience to uncover what really happened to the astronauts.
Rita, do you read me? John!
In commentary of the film, director Lopez Gallego and editor Patrick Lussier actually tell us that in their minds, it was one of the astronauts' sons who appears in the movie very briefly early on that uploaded the footage to tell his father's story. That we as an audience are now watching. And although this is not explained in the movie itself, it's a nice little addition to the story for fans who want to know more about that doomed space mission.
Ryan, my boy, what a nice tell him his old man's going to the moon. I would have loved to have brought him a souvenir, maybe a moon rock.
I think the movie works so well for me as it taps into the paranoia and extreme danger of space exploration that in reality our brave space explorers face on a daily basis, and uses that scary reality of space horror, which was summed up perfectly in the fantastic tagline for Alien in 1978, "In space, no one can hear you scream." And that encapsulates the true horror and isolation of space travel in one terrifying cadence, which was much better put than Apollo 18's tagline, which was, "There's a reason we've never gone back to the moon." Because unless you know that Apollo 17, flown in 1972 by astronauts Gene Cernan, Ron Evans and Harrison Schmitt, was NASA's last flight to the moon, you would not understand that tagline. And on the negative side of the movie's production, that may have confused some potential audience members to begin with, as it's not explicitly clear what the movie is about. And this might help to explain in part the film's lukewarm reaction from audiences and critics. But on the upside, Apollo 18 also very cleverly bases its narrative in the reality of the Cold War between Russia and the United States, and incorporates the space race between the two superpowers, blending the allure of historical mystery with the slow burn tension of found footage horror and sci-fi movies.
There's just a lot at stake here, you know? We're talking nation versus nation, and the race is still on.
For me, as a follower of the two nation space programs when I was a kid, that part of the story engaged me as a film goer. And in fact, the more that I think about this movie, I guess that I was the target audience that they were aiming for, because I really like this film a lot.
Something's out here.
What also makes Apollo 18 particularly fascinating is its independent roots. The film was produced with a modest budget by Dimension Films, a really well-known company to horror fans who helped foster lower-budget horror film franchises such as the ongoing sequels for Hellraiser, They Bought Children of the Corn, Scream, and many, many more. The director, Gonzalo Lopez Gallego, was an independent filmmaker with a background in Spanish-language thrillers, so he was no stranger to creating chilling narratives, and his experience allowed him to approach Apollo 18 not as a flashy, effects-driven space opera, but as a minimalistic horror piece that relied on atmosphere and suspense.
Nate, talk to me. What do you see? Looks like tracks. Footprints? Maybe there is another cosmonaut. No.
I think it's often because of these lower budgets that some found footage films work so well, because filmmakers have to be more creative to deliver the thrills.
Come up here quick! I need to use the CP! This is f***ing crazy shit.
Another great aspect of this movie is the decision to lean on subtle scares rather than big budget spectacle, and this is of course a defining trait of many independent horror films.
It's moving. Get out. Get out. I got it. It's coming. Damn it, man! Get it out!
The struggle is to make the best movie you can on a budget that works for the story as well as the audience. And Lopez Gallego's creativity is, I think, what gives Apollo 18 its raw, gritty authenticity and its grounding as a science fiction story in the same rough documentary-like texture that made earlier found footage films like The Blair Witch so unsettling.
We're not safe here. Get rid of me! Hang in! Just me they want! It's just me! What the hell are you doing?
Production-wise, I think this movie is a great achievement. By setting the action on the moon, the filmmakers had a unique challenge. They had to maintain the illusion of real footage while also creating a foreign, isolated and scary environment. And watching the film again for this review, I think they achieved a great cinematic hybrid of truth and fiction, especially with Lopez Gallego's choice to use the grainy, degraded visuals mimicking the 1970s NASA technology. Because of the film's low budget, they had to make some big decisions about the look of the film, and they would actually scratch the film, and that damage would be irreversible. The damaged film we see in the film is really deteriorated through physical means. No CGI was used, and it looks fantastic on screen and perfect for the narrative, style, and aged look of the movie.
Makes no sense.
Come on, I mean, think about Watergate, Nate. I mean, that was our president, for Christ's sakes. And you don't think that DOD would just lie to us?
These imperfections in the film, such as the static interference, crackling audio, and low-resolution images, add a layer of believability that I think amplifies the claustrophobia of the space location. And the damaged look of the film and beautiful, unsynced soundscapes, such as the echoing radio chatter of the astronauts, makes it feel as if one wrong move is the end for these space explorers.
We play our cards pretty close to the vest, Commander. I'm sure you can understand.
Maybe a little too close.
The lunar landscape itself becomes a character in the film, and the astronauts find themselves in a desolate, hauntingly quiet environment where something is clearly watching them. The black starless sky gives the film a foreboding sense of dread and isolation, and there is one moment I really like when one of the astronauts briefly glances back at the Earth, almost 230,000 miles away, and in that moment, we know that they are doomed.
Something's moving.
What?
Something is inside my suit.
It is a unique film in that it has a bleakness to it, and the moon location makes for a desperate and horrific real-life feeling of terror. And I think that that is one of the true appeals of the found footage genre. If you are like me, a film lover who really invests themselves in the story and likes to get lost in strange worlds for entertainment,
It's hard to believe the sun never shines in some of these places.
that because of the style and gritty look of Apollo 18, you believe that in the 90 minutes that you watch, that this did indeed happen. And for me, that is the sign of any great movie.
We're go for the moon.
This movie was edited by an independent legend too, filmmaker Patrick Lussier, who said this was one of the most unique films that he has ever been part of. And considering that he's been an editor and director of such films as Drive Angry with Nicolas Cage, and he's worked extensively with master of horror Wes Craven on Red Eye, Scream franchise, Vampire in Brooklyn, and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, that says an awful lot. Lussier is an accomplished filmmaker, and his involvement on Apollo 18 as an editor, I think, is one of the main reasons that elevates it above other found footage movies. Lussier is never afraid to experiment, and for that reason I greatly admire his work as an artist and especially as an editor, and his willingness to take risks really pays off with Apollo 18. Its editing is completely unique. Lucia said in commentary that it was such scope, but yet it was so claustrophobic at the same time. And I quote Lucia, "You're seeing a huge vista, but you're stuck inside a fishbowl." And I think this works fantastically for the claustrophobic terror of the piece.
Somebody got hurt pretty bad. I don't like this.
Listening to Lucia speak with Lopez Gallego on the commentary track to the film, it seemed the production was constantly being rewritten freeform, and the filmmakers had carte blanche in how they would edit the film in post-production. Scenes were intercut and rearranged, and dialogue was even lifted from scenes and overlaid in other scenes to make them work. There isn't another film that I've seen that is edited quite like this. It must have been a liberating experience for the filmmakers, and you can hear this in their excitement in their voices as they discuss the editing process on the great commentary track to the DVD and Blu-ray. The filmmakers also talk about their options and how the movie changed as they worked on splicing it together. One huge change was that they took out the larger alien creatures that originally attacked the astronauts at the very end of the film. These huge monsters that are now only briefly seen, Lucia affectionately calls moonsters, and apparently they didn't look threatening enough. And Lopez Gallego added that you couldn't really tell the scale of the monsters, as the moon set was so desolate that there was nothing to give them any huge sense of scale. He said that he realized in the edit that it was better to keep the character of Captain Nate as the antagonist, because a human enemy was more relatable for an audience to fear and to understand. And personally, I think this works great, as the performance from English-born actor Lloyd Owen is pretty damn menacing, and I'm sure that I wouldn't mess with Captain Nate, especially not after he's infected by an alien toxin that drives him crazy.
Nate, look at me. Why don't you kill me? Nate, it's me. Listen to me. Look at me. It's me, okay? I'm just trying.
And speaking of the performances in the movie, Lopez Gallego said that around 40% of the movie was unscripted after rehearsals went so well, and the close quarters and small cast of 3 meant that the actors really got to know their characters. And that's important because, especially in a found footage movie, the crewmen have to be believable, and their chemistry is great in the movie. And I think Warren Christie, Lloyd Owen, and especially Ryan Robbins all do a fantastic job.
Oh, you know, it'd be nice to have some alone time. It's getting crowded in here.
In fact, I'd like to give a special mention to actor Ryan Robbins, as he's an actor that I greatly admire. He did a great job on another show as the drink driver who almost kills our Stephen King surrogate.
I can't deal with this right now, man. Okay, I got 12 points in a DUI on my license. There's an ounce in my glove compartment.
That was Craig R. Baxley's excellent series Kingdom Hospital, and I recently saw him in season 1 of Real Detective, playing a real-life cop, Detective John Cameron, in episode 8 that was named Misery, and he was very powerful in that role. He has a presence and personality which makes him an actor I enjoy watching a great deal, so I just thought that was worth a mention.
Houston, you give that man a cigar. From up here, that looked very pretty. Excellent touchdown.
Apparently, Robbins' role of the command module pilot John Gray was originally a much smaller role in Apollo 18, but the technical advisor on the film, Gerald D. Griffin, who in reality was an integral part of NASA's real-life space program and was lead flight director on 3 lunar missions himself, working on Apollo 12, Apollo 15, and Apollo 17. And he apparently said to the filmmakers, and I quote, "Why don't you have more of the third guy in the movie?" As in reality, the pilot who is not on the moon's surface has the most important job of all, to get the crew home safely.
Ben, I'm gonna get you out of there, okay? You think you can pilot that thing?
And as a result, Robbins' role was significantly expanded, and I'm thankful, as Robbins' skill brings a great deal of reality to the character.
Liberty, this is freedom. Do you read me?
Which, of course, is a really important factor in a found footage movie.
Stepping down the ladder.
Gerald D. Griffin also had a lot to do with the reality of the production while watching the performances. He actually stepped in and said, "These 3 characters need to calm down, because in reality, astronauts are trained and chosen especially to deal with the most stressful situations imaginable." And I quote Griffin again, "They would never lose their cool like this."
No one's leaving anyone. You'll have to. We are not dying up here.
Hearing this made me love the movie even more, as when I was a kid, like most children, astronauts were and still are people I consider real-life heroes, and knowing that Griffin said that made me respect them all the more. Of course, Apollo 18 is a horror movie, so there is a lot of shouting and stressing out.
Please, just give me a break.
But it's good to know that Griffin pointed out that to aid in authenticity in the film, perhaps the actors might just take it down a notch.
No further communication from Houston. Oxygen levels are running low.
As I mentioned earlier, one of the main reasons I respect this movie is the technical execution and experimentation that went into its unique look. In commentary, Lopez Gallego and Patrick Lucier mentioned that actual footage shot by astronauts was used in the film, and they literally went through hundreds of hours of NASA's actual space footage.
Earth in all her glory.
And chose carefully what images to splice into the movie, and that just blows my mind. Not only are we getting a great looking movie with a clear visual style and experimental approach, but for lovers of space exploration, we actually get to see real NASA footage. And it is edited together flawlessly with the production footage. This is a testament, again, to the great skill of Patrick Lucier. The man is a powerhouse of talent as an editor, and for me, that use of real footage makes this movie all the more terrifying. The actors also wore real spacesuits, and most of the scenes were filmed inside a real lunar module for authenticity, and for a space nut like me, that's really cool stuff, and gives Apollo 18 yet another point as to why the movie is high on my list of favorite found footage movies. It really does look the part.
When you take a look at that, that makes you think, doesn't it?
Speaking on the look of the film, during production, Lopez Gallego shot with 16mm film and blew it up to get the feel of Super 8 material. GoPros were used with fisheye lenses, and cheap cameras were used inside the module to let the action unfold in real time, which was especially great for the actors' improvisations. And often cameras were fed into SD outputs, as they wanted the footage to look older and not scaled up using HDMI or HD connections. At one point in the commentary for the film, Lopez Gallego makes a joke as to one day a producer came onto the set and they were shooting that day's footage on an old monitor to get an aged look. So they weren't actually filming the action itself, but filming the image of the action on a grainy old monitor. And the producer simply stopped for a second and said, "I really hope you know what you're doing here."
The men that went to the moon to explore in peace remain on the moon to rest in peace.
The 16mm film stock was damaged before shooting, and the short shooting schedule meant that this was a leap of faith and commitment to the visual style of the film. And you have to give the filmmakers respect for that. I'm an editor myself, and when you have multiple frame rates to deal with, things can quickly become a nightmare. But in Apollo 18, the fact that most of the cameras shot with different frame rates made the footage almost impossible to sync sound up correctly, but as if by magic or pure accident, this glitchy remote camera style actually helps to give the film a more authentic look, as if we are seeing the footage being streamed live with an almost 240,000-mile buffer. In all fairness, this movie really does just have me geeking out all over the place. And I love the fact that the filmmakers tried to do something, especially Lucier's editing techniques, to give this film a real authenticity.
No words can describe how it feels to be here.
Coming towards the end of this review, I have to say that while many found footage films take place in familiar settings such as remote forests and cabins, suburban houses, city streets, Apollo 18 dares to move the genre into an entirely new realm, and they took on a huge job to make this story work. In doing so, I think that they expanded the possibilities of the found footage narrative. The natural constraints of the genre with its shaky cameras and real-time unfolding events, I think mix perfectly with the intense isolation and the true terror and danger of space exploration in reality.
Let's get out of here.
And I think that this delivers a exponential feeling of dread throughout the whole movie.
Nice track.
Similar to the isolation of Alien or one of my favorite sci-fi films, Outland, starring Sean Connery, in which because of being in outer space, There is nowhere to run from your enemy, and you have no choice but to stand and fight for your life. You're never sure whether the terror comes from the unknown alien life or the overwhelming existential horror of being lost in space.
Babe, is that recording? Sorry, Dad, love you.
Over 10 years on, Apollo 18 still holds up to me as a daring, if divisive piece of found footage filmmaking. Its quiet, understated horror is bolstered by a commitment to the independent production values by the filmmakers that serves as a reminder of how much can be achieved with limited resources if filmmakers are talented enough to pull it off. At a time when found footage films were becoming a commercial staple, Apollo 18 reminded us refreshingly that there is a true spirit in this subgenre of horror. It should be intimate, it should be unsettling, and it should have a reality that is driven by the unknown. For fans of found footage horror who appreciate atmosphere, this film stands as an overlooked gem, lost in the deep, dark depths of space.
American astronaut, Ben Anderson, Apollo 18.
I'll end with something that hit home with me, and I think expresses how I feel about the whole movie, a quote from editor Patrick Lucier. He stated, "This isn't Paranormal Activity. Those rules don't apply here. There are different rules to our vision. This was an experiment."
All these cameras, man. They're watching. We're on our own.
Thanks for watching my take on the found footage horror Apollo 18, a movie that I think deserves a lot more attention. If you would like to hear more from me on the found footage genre and other works of cinema, please remember to like and subscribe. I'm a small channel and I need all the help I can get. Subscribing really means more to me than you could ever know and will really help me in creating the content that I wish to make in the future here on the Boneyard. Let me know what you think about the found footage genre in the comments below, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.